this is how it is for me as far as contemplating what would happen the if the masses started coming around. Because even in this community, when it seems like more people are with it or understanding or getting kind of in tune with the actual reality, when people start doing that with me, it's like I'm immediately bored of the whole thing, like, you know, because when everybody else is so-called sleeping and you're awake and you have all this stuff going on inside, then you are in some sort of a special position. You just are. You're different than everybody else for the most part, and for the most part you've become aware that it's not something that's really supposed to be talked about to the others, the sleepers and whatnot. And so you have this feeling of specialness. But for me, when people start getting with it, like if I were to imagine if it flipped, and just the whole population was this similar, there wouldn't be any more imagined power structure that's suppressing, and the whole thing would go sideways, or not sideways, but it would just change in an instant, the whole situation. And I see it as, even in the awakened community, so-called, when people get closer to what I consider a reasonable state of awareness, then I lose interest in talking about the stuff. I immediately go into what basically I would have been doing my entire life had all of this not happened in the first place, which is being myself, being creative, exploring, being curious, and actually interacting, being able to care for people without having negative repercussions, being past no good deed goes unpunished type of things, right? I would just go even more completely silent. Like, I'm pretty silent now, even in my contributions to tubes and whatnot. I'm pretty silent. I don't make lots of proclamations or suggestions for how people should live or change their lives. I just do what I do, and it's quiet. And I imagine if it flipped to where all the people suddenly got brought to the same level, I would completely stop talking. I would probably forget about it. I would forget about everything. All of this stuff. It would just disappear, and it would be like everybody's in the playground and everybody's playing, and it wouldn't be tiered, and it wouldn't be hierarchy and pretend power. Because to me, it's already pretend power anyway. None of it's real anyway to me. So if everybody woke up, or everybody stopped playing that game, then I wouldn't say two more words about it. I would remember it, lest it happen again, but I would release it quite quickly, I think. Because everybody, that's that's the question that usually comes out of people when they come to some sort of level, is like, well, what do we do? Well, that's just something that is natural to have to contemplate, is if you're faced with any thought that's outside of the limited lifespan thing, and anything that's outside of that is essentially eternity. Um, well, you automatically come to, well, what do we do? You know, and then things of, oh, you know, we're gonna get bored, or what if it sucks existing forever? All these things, all these thoughts are gonna come in, and that's, you know, that's something that you have to discover in your own way. Because what I know for myself is that doing things is not like devising plans, and it's only ever been a receding for me. You recede more and more from the planner, the active aspect, and you recede further and further and further and further, and paradoxically that brings more things happening, that brings more people around, and it brings the organic flow back, and that thing, that sticking point, that constriction point, the ego mind, whatever it was, the fall, all that stuff, that just goes out without a whimper. You know, it's like, it's not a fight. Anybody that's still thinking there's going to be some sort of a war or something, it's not. The war is something that's held internally by people, and yes, sometimes if enough people are holding that and getting fear porned into being angsty about what Vietnam is doing or whatever, then yes, physical wars happen and people physically die and things like that. But in the grand scheme of things, speaking from an eternal perspective, that's the one I hold, you know, that I've been in that, there isn't any point to war and all of that stuff, all the conflict, unless it's like part of the play. Once you're to that point, then it can't be as anything other than part of the play, unless some other part of the realm has done something to attack you. But that doesn't even happen. Like that, it's impossible to describe, but that can't even happen once you yourself personally are beyond that. It doesn't happen in your world, in your universe. So past all of that conflict, that question comes up, is what do I do? What do we do? It's like, we've been around forever, what do we do, you know? And that's part of it, you know. It's like, it's something, I can say that thought is only disturbing or traumatizing when you're still like grasping, when you're still wanting, you know, because when you're not, then it's just like people have left in the comments, it is what it is, and it's nothing else besides what it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you want to throw some spirituality into the mix, then that's the greatest grace that there is. And I've seen that so many times, like in all the trauma stuff I've been through, as bad, as horrible as it could get, and it got very bad, the saving grace always, and it was never like some religious figure or a Jesus swooping out of the sky or anything like that. It was always the fact that even as I was pressed to like desperation or terror or just whatever horrible, horrifying things were happening, after I had exhausted all of my trying or manipulating or planning my way out of it, because that's how it happens. You're presented with this situation or whatever, and once you've gone through the whole thing, like mentally, if something physical is happening physically, you know, if you've run away from something, or if, say, you're having existential crisis and you need to like relocate your physical body somewhere because you think maybe that will help. Anything you try, or cry out to God, or you know, that's usually thrown in there at some point, because you go through everything. In those situations, you automatically go through every single like trick that you know, and you just do it. And for the most part, depending on how traumatic the situation is, every single one of them fails, and you're still in the situation. And the saving grace is always that there's nothing to do about it. There's like nothing whatsoever to do. And that realization can be carried through out to whatever other side you end up coming out on, no matter how insane it is or illogical. That realization that even if you're confronted in, say, this particular state of the realm, and you have problems with what do I do with myself, well, once that annoyance or discomfort gets big enough for you, you're going to go through all of your possibilities of how do I deal with this problem. And depending on how problematic it actually is, say being bored, at some point you will come and say, well, I tried everything and I'm still bored. And then you realize again that there still was nothing you could have done about it. Nothing. And that part, like that part that you literally have no control over, that's your saving grace. And you don't know about it. Like, you can't know about that until all the possibilities have been exhausted and you're tying yourself into the Ouroboros figure eight. You know, there's nothing to do about it. Can't, when you're speaking of like yourself or whatever that is, it's the case of you can't live with it and you can't live without it. Like what people say about their wives sometimes. Can't live with her, can't live without her. And there's always a point reached, no matter how bad the situation is or good, to where you just realize like it's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do. Or just I do my best and let it be at that. And that's, you know, should the realm ever flip itself back right side up again and it was sort of normal, then I would everything would just go out the window. Like all of this stuff, all of this, you know, thing, whatever it is that we're doing here, I would forget about it and I'd, you know, go do something fun, learn something new. Because it is infinite and you can't really get bored. You can only get bored if you're... It's impossible. Anyway. Thoughts. This is some meandering thoughts for you tonight, or to morning, or whatever it is for you. Good night.